Castlevania. What can I say about Castlevania? It's fucking awesome, that's what I can say. None of the games really have much of a story, but hey, unless you're playing an RPG or an adventure game, story is usually just a distraction from poor gameplay. So in short, Castlevania doesn't need a freaking story because these games are epic. And really hard, too. Give any Castlevania game pre-Symphony of the Night to one of today's gamers, and I guarantee they will cry themselves to sleep that night. But I'm not here to talk about those. That's already been covered by a far better reviewer than I. No, I'm here to discuss the modern installments of the series, barring the DS games because I have no means of recording footage from them, nor are they significant to my backstory with this series. About a year ago, I played Symphony of the Night for the first time. It was Christmas Eve, and I've just gotten $25 worth of PlayStation Network funds as a gift. I already downloaded some mediocre puzzle platformer for people who smoke and people who drink, and then I saw that in the PS1 Classics section, something way more worth my money. I'll admit I wasn't a big fan of exploration-based games. I was a former MapleStory addict, but that's about it. I decided, what the hell, I had $10 worth of funds left over, and it's not like I intended to spend them on anything else. If I didn't like the gameplay, chances are I'd at least like the cheesy voice acting. But it blew my damn mind, and I spent like the next 3 days plowing through the game with a fedora and a chocolate orange. Then I got to Dracula. This was it. The final countdown. I saved my game and ground my ass to level 50 just to be sure. But I ended up killing him in like 3 minutes on my first try. Lame! I wanted more, so I downloaded some GBA ROMs and started up Circle of the Moon. Right away I thought, the opening scroll looks kind of ugly. What's with this font? I mean, I'm glad they didn't use Comic Sans or some other shit, but really, appearances matter, Konami. And why is Dracula bigger than his own coffin? That makes no sense. But once the game actually starts, it's pretty good. The music is clear as day and the graphics are relatively decent, and the DSS system was a fun new feature. How it works is that you randomly find cards after defeating enemies. They come in two types, action and attribute. Combining them will create a nice little effect. For example, the Mercury card enhances your whip, and the Salamander card is associated with fire. So if you combine those two cards, your whip will be on fire. It'll take you a little while to find all the cards, but some of the combinations are well worth your time. It's a fun little side quest. The fighting is the same as usual, you jump around, whip monsters, and gain experience. The bosses are nice and challenging, though they get really tough really quickly. I've heard a lot of people say Order of Ecclesia is the hardest of the Metroidvanias, but really, Order of Ecclesia is piss easy compared to this. But it's good, especially for a GBA launch title. Though how does this game compare to Symphony of the Night? Well, there are some things that suck about this game, the least of which is that it still has the same problem with the map percentage as Symphony of the Night. Why do I have to go to the pause menu to see how much of the map I've covered? Shouldn't that be on the map screen? The controls are also awkward, they're kinda stiff. Gone is Alucard's jumping, which was smooth as butter. Instead we've got Nathan's incredibly awkward jumps. I think it might actually be worse than the jumping in the linear games. Even if you couldn't steer your jumps in those games, at least you could jump long distances. But here it's just so tedious. To get up a platform, you have to walk all the way over to it so you can jump straight up. Speaking of tedium, you're forced to backtrack way too often in this game, and Nathan's slow walk makes it even worse. There is a dash, but like the jump, it's awkward. You do it by double tapping in either direction, but oftentimes you'll already be dashing the first time you tap, and the second tap cancels it. Konami seems to have this problem a lot, like try playing Turtles in Time with the auto dash turned off. Now I know why they put that in. But overall it's a nice follow-up to Symphony of the Night, but the awkwardness and tedium ruin it. But hey, it's better than the last two games done by this team at least. Next, oh god. This game is the reason why I am doing this review. Harmony of Dissonance is, without a doubt, the worst Castlevania game ever made. Yeah, worse than this one. Yes, worse than this one. Hell, even worse than... okay, maybe not that bad. You play as Just Belmont, Simon's grandson, and you'll notice right away that the graphics are pretty bad. The backgrounds are great, but the sprites are ugly as sin, especially Just. He looks so cartoony. Especially when he runs. Castlevania and cartoons do not mix. I thought we'd learned this after the Captain N episode where Alucard was a skate punk teenager and Sypha was an old man as opposed to a oh dear god I just jizzed in my pants. What's with that blue trail that follows him? I know he's like the great-great-grandson of oh, but for Christ's sake, Simon didn't have that. Hell, Sypha didn't have that. And the save points look familiar too, and what is Death doing here? Did Konami get a bunch of complaints that Circle of the Moon wasn't enough like Symphony of the Night, so they just decided to make this game as similar to Symphony of the Night as they could get away with? The next thing you'll notice is that the music is nowhere near as good as the music in, well, any Castlevania game. In fact, it's downright terrible. According to Dictionary.com, dissonance is an inharmonious or harsh sound, discord, cacophony. Well, you got that right. The music you're hearing right now is the one good track in the entire game. Where's Vampire Killer? Well, guess what? You have to beat the game, unlock Boss Rush mode, and enter the Konami code so you can play as Simon. Then you get to hear Vampire Killer. And unlike the rest of the music, it's good. It might actually be the best version of Vampire Killer in the series. What the hell? We got trolled by Michiru Yamane. The dashing, again, is awkward. The L and R buttons dash left and right respectively, whereas in most Castlevania games you just have a backdash assigned to the L button. So if you're facing left and you want to backdash, you might instinctively push the L button and oops, you charge right into the enemy's attack, you fucking idiot. Is there anything good about this game? Well, there are a few things, like you find various spell books lying around that change the effects of your sub-weapons. For example, combining the dagger with the ice spellbook lets you shoot icicles, or using it with the Bible makes a wave of ice. I thought this was a pretty cool feature. It doesn't cost any hearts either, just MP. So if you run out of MP, you can just unequip the spellbook and switch to your plain sub-weapons. And see this? The map percentage is finally on the map screen, where it should be. But all in all, this game has very few redeeming qualities. It looks, sounds, and plays nothing like a Castlevania game. It feels more like a cheap knockoff or a bad fan game. I've heard it's pathetically easy, but I never bothered to play through the whole thing because I just couldn't stand it. By now I was starting to lose faith. With a gulp, I looked up Aria of Sorrow. If this game wasn't any good, that would have been when I'd declare the Castlevania series dead. Nothing could live up to the hype of the series after Symphony of the Night. But to my very pleasant surprise, it's actually better than Symphony of the Night. Yeah. The music still isn't as good as Symphony of the Night, or even Circle of the Moon, but it's still very enjoyable. The graphics are nice, especially for the GBA. The Soul System is probably the most innovative gimmick in a Castlevania game yet. It works sort of like Kirby or Mega Man, where when you kill an enemy, there's a chance you'll get their power. This can range from attacks like throwing bones or shooting lightning, to other skills like gliding or summoning a familiar, to more simple things like increasing a certain stat or walking on water. That's right, Jesus was one of Soma's previous incarnations. Even the controls are great. Believe it or not, Soma is even easier to control than Alucard. Aria of Sorrow is easily the best GBA Castlevania game, and it's even on par with the DS games. The only bad thing I can say about it is, it's too short. Without a walkthrough, I beat the game in 4 hours. That is pathetic for a Metroidvania, but those 4 hours were probably the 4 most fun hours I spent playing the GBA. And that concludes my review of the GBA Castlevania games. I've never been good with conclusions, as you can tell by my previous videos, but the bottom line is, if you got 10 or 15 bucks to spare and a few days to kill, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow is well worth the time and money. Circle of the Moon is good too if you're up for some old-school hardcore Castlevania action, but stay the fuck away from Harmony of Dissonance. Peace.